The rage started not with a bang, but with a discrepancy. Elias Vance, a man who calibrated his mornings by the nearest kilowatt hour, noticed the anomaly 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday. He ran his bi-weekly energy report from the utilities dashboard, expecting the familiar linear consumption curve for his Unit 412. Instead, there was a spike, a sudden deep valley in the early hours of the morning, followed by a corresponding surge that swallowed the deficit. It was a load consistent with the Level 2 EV charger he'd installed 2 months prior, a Wallbox Pulsar Plus, wired specifically for his parking space, 412A, and secured behind a newly installed, bright yellow chain-link barrier with a private sign. Elias drove a Hyundai Ioniq 5. He charged every third night, starting at 11:00 p.m., never deviating. The pattern on the bill was wrong. It showed usage on nights he hadn't plugged in, and sometimes double the usual consumption when he had. $50, he muttered, staring at the screen of his laptop, the pale glow illuminating the intricate diagrams on his face. Maybe 60. It's not the money, it's the principle. The principle was theft. The principle was the brazen entitlement of someone who saw a private utility connection as a public watering hole. Elias lived in the Zenith, a new upscale condo tower where parking was currency and privacy was the ultimate luxury. He'd gone through 3 layers of bureaucracy, HOA, condo board, and utility, to get his dedicated line and charger installed. It was his. His first move was passive-aggressive. The note. He printed a crisp, capital letters memo on premium cardstock, slipped it into a plastic protector, and zip-tied it directly to the charger head. Attention, this charger is private property, Unit 412. Unauthorized use constitutes theft of service and will be reported to the HOA and law enforcement. The unit is now under 24/7 video and energy log monitoring. He checked the charger the next morning. The plug was neatly inserted into his own Ioniq 5, which he had deliberately left half-charged. The note was gone. Not crumpled, not torn, simply vanished. The subtle blue light on the wall box indicated charging was complete, and the energy usage log, accessible only through his secured app, confirmed a 6.5 kilowatt-hour session had run from 3:17 a.m. to 4:45 a.m. His car was plugged in, but he had been asleep. Someone had unplugged his car, used his charger for theirs, and then returned his plug to his car, hoping the light would fool him. The casual audacity of the act sent a tremor of pure, cold fury through him. This wasn't a mistake. This was a scheme. The ghost in the current Elias, a former systems engineer for a security firm, shifted from annoyed resident to tactical operator. He pulled up the complex's CC camera feed access points, mapping the blind spots near his designated parking spot. 12A. The main garage camera was useless. It offered a wide, low-resolution sweep that made identification impossible. He needed proximity and detail. He walked the garage floor, his expensive leather loafers silent on the polished concrete. That's when he saw her. She was parked 3 spots down in 409B Carol Denver's. Her car, a gleaming white Tesla Model 3, looked immaculate. Carol was the kind of person who seemed to run the complex simply by existing there. She was a regular presence at the HOA meetings, always smiling tightly, always suggesting new rules, rules that benefited only her. He'd once heard her loudly arguing with a landscaper over the exact hue of the petunias. He'd never seen her drive the Tesla before, which meant she either kept odd hours or, more likely, used public transport for work. She was in her early 50s, clad in an expensive cashmere cardigan, speaking sharply into her phone. As he walked past, pretending to check his tire pressure, he glanced at her car. The charging port was exactly where his charging cable would reach if pulled taut. That night, Elias stayed up. He set up a temporary monitoring station in his car, a thermal camera pointed at the charger head, recording to an SD card and a laptop running a continuous ping to his Wallbox unit's IP address. At 3:05 a.m., the screen on his laptop flickered. The Wallbox went offline, then instantly back online. A momentary disconnect, then a successful handshake. Someone had just unplugged his car and plugged in another. Then, The shadow. On the thermal camera, a figure moved with practiced quickness. They wore a long coat, a smart way to obscure identifying features. The figure leaned over, disconnected his plug, and smoothly inserted it into their own vehicle. A moment later, a distinct silhouette of the Tesla's rear lights appeared as the car began drawing power. It was too dark to be certain, but the posture, the height, the way she flicked her hair back, it screamed Carol Danvers. Elias got out of his car, his voice low and tight. "Hey, what are you doing?" The figure froze, hands still on the cable. Carol turned, the coat momentarily falling open to reveal the familiar pale gray cashmere. Her expression shifted from caught-in-the-act panic to a terrifyingly composed superiority in milliseconds. "Elias! My goodness, you startled me. Just borrowing your plug. Mine's having a momentary issue. You know how these cheap things are," she said, her voice smooth, dripping with false charm. She didn't look him in the eye. "That's my private charger, Carol. It's theft." Her charm curdled. "Don't be dramatic, Elias. It's 5 minutes. I'll replace the juice. You're plugged in anyway." "I was plugged in. You unplugged my car to plug in yours." "Oh, was I? Well, it must have been an accident. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Honestly, the HOA should put in more general chargers." "We can discuss it at the next meeting, shall we?" She yanked the plug out of her Tesla, the metallic scrape echoing in the empty garage, and shoved it back into Elias's car with unnecessary force. She didn't wait for a reply, simply walked briskly toward the elevator, her heels clicking an aggressive retreat. Elias looked at the recorded thermal footage. The angle was bad. The face was obscured. Her denial was perfect, a calculated blend of minimal admission and maximum deflection. She had weaponized ambiguity. The architecture of proof, he knew the HOA would side with the charismatic Carol unless he provided evidence that was digitally irrefutable, evidence that could not be dismissed as a misunderstanding, a one-off borrow, or poor lighting. He needed to prove a pattern of intrusion, and he needed a time-stamped, high-resolution picture of the charging port while it was actively charging her vehicle. Elias walked back into his condo, his mind already designing the solution. His background wasn't just security systems, it was forensics. The wallbox unit was attached to the wall. He couldn't easily modify its internal software, but he could monitor the cable. The trap became a 3-part system, built over the next 48 hours in the solitude of his home office. The sensor. He purchased an industrial-grade, Wi-Fi-enabled smart plug and disguised its plastic shell to look exactly like the surge protector unit that normally sat near his charger. This plug would handle the 240V load and, critically, log every watt and provide a remote kill switch via a custom API he developed. If the usage exceeded his car's established charging profile and occurred outside his programmed charging hours, the plug would signal the next 2 components. The eye. He bought a high-resolution security camera, no bigger than a golf ball. He painted it the exact shade of the wallbox casing and secured it internally, drilling a tiny, perfectly angled hole in the bottom plastic. The lens was positioned to capture a clear, head-on image of the charging port of whatever vehicle was connected, ensuring the car's make, model, and license plate, if positioned correctly, were captured in 4K clarity. This camera was set to record only when the smart plug signaled an unauthorized load. The shield. The final piece was a custom-made, tamper-proof metal casing for the cable. It looked like a standard cable tidy, but it featured a small magnetic locking mechanism controlled by a private RFID tag embedded in his key fob. Crucially, the cable tidy contained a pressure sensor that, if the charging plug was inserted or removed without the RFID key, and outside his programmed times, would log the event. He installed the system that Saturday afternoon, telling the complex manager he was upgrading the cable management for safety. Carol Danvers watched him from her balcony with a neutral expression, occasionally sipping from a white mug. By midnight, the trap was set. The system was armed. Elias lay in bed, the laptop glowing softly on his nightstand, running his custom logging script. He didn't want to sleep. He wanted to catch the thief in the act, not in the shadows, but in the unblinking, digital light of the truth. He didn't have to wait long. At 3:12 a.m., a series of rapid cold beeps echoed from the laptop. Elias sat bolt upright. The log entry flashed green. Timestamp 2025 10:10 03:12:35. Event unauthorized load detected 7.1 kW. Trigger power draw exceeds threshold and RFID. Mismatch action initiating video capture cam 4112A. Elias's hand trembled slightly as he clicked the link to the captured footage. A single, crisp, time-stamped photograph loaded onto the screen. It was Carol Danvers's pristine white Tesla, bathed in the cool LED light of the garage. The shot was perfect. The charger's plug was firmly in her car's charging port. And in the bottom corner of the frame, the camera had even caught a sliver of her license plate. Elias leaned back, the tension in his chest finally releasing, replaced by a deep, satisfying chill. He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt the pure, clinical calm of a man holding the smoking gun. This wasn't just a picture. It was a court exhibit. He knew what Carol would say when he PI. Elias did not sleep. The crisp, digital photograph of Carol Danvers's Tesla drinking his electricity was more potent than any caffeine. He spent the remaining hours until dawn compiling his dossier. This was not merely a report. It was a prosecution file. He prepared 3 separate exhibits. Exhibit A, the pattern of theft. A spreadsheet logging the unauthorized draw times, kilowatt-hour consumption, and the corresponding cost calculations over the past 3 weeks. He didn't just calculate the cost of the electricity itself, which was about $180. He added the estimated cost of the wear and tear on his commercial-grade charger and the cost of his wasted time, inflating the total demand to a respectable $500. Exhibit B, the attempted deception. The logs from his Wallbox app showing the plug being disconnected from his Ioniq 5 and reconnected to an unknown vehicle profile, all outside his established schedule. This proved intent to deceive, not a simple misunderstanding. Exhibit C, the smoking gun. The high-resolution photograph taken by the eye at 3:12:35 a.m., clearly showing his charging plug inserted into Carol's registered license plate, 409B. He duplicated the image and added a red box around the license plate and charging port for emphasis. At 8 a.m., Elias, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that signaled professional severity, walked down to the property management office in the lobby. The manager, Mr. Henry Chen, was a man in his late 60s, perpetually exhausted and reliant on a weak, milky coffee. "Mr. Vance, what can I do for you this morning?" Mr. Chen asked, already rubbing his temples. Dealing with parking disputes was the least favorite part of his job. "I am here to file a formal complaint of theft of services, property intrusion, and significant violation of the condominium covenants, conditions and restrictions," Elias stated, placing the thick labeled folder on the manager's desk. The sound was sharp. Mr. Chen opened the folder with a sigh. "Mr. Vance, I appreciate your zeal, but we get parking complaints every week. Did someone park over your line? Did they leave a shopping cart?" "No, Mr. Chen. They connected their personal vehicle to my private, sub-metered utility line 3 feet from this office and stole power worth approximately $500, not including the administrative costs of resolving this." Mr. Chen's eyes finally landed on Exhibit C. He picked up the printed 8x10 glossy photo. His hand froze, the mug of coffee halfway to his lips. The photograph was damning. The clarity was unnerving. Who is this?" Mr. Chen asked, his voice suddenly thinner. "That, Mr. Chen, is Carol Danvers, Unit 409, and her vehicle, a white Tesla Model 3. The timestamp is 3:12:35 a.m. this morning. I have provided 3 weeks of logs showing a pattern of similar intrusion. I've spoken to Ms. Danvers once, and she denied it, claiming it was an accident. This photo proves it was a deliberate, continuous act of theft." Mr. Chen swallowed hard. Carol Danvers was a force of nature in the Zenith, often threatening to remove managers who didn't comply with her exacting standards. Taking action against her was like poking a hornet's nest with a very short stick. "Mr. Vance, I understand your frustration. But this is serious. Ms. Danvers is on the finance committee. We need to handle this delicate..." There is nothing delicate about theft, Mr. Chen. If I had walked into the lobby and taken the money out of the petty cash box, would you handle it delicately? No, you would call the police. The CC&Rs are clear. Unauthorized utility usage is grounds for an immediate and severe fine, and potentially the revocation of parking privileges. Elias leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous, measured level. I designed the surveillance system that captured this. I have the metadata, the load logs, and the time-synced video footage. If you attempt to bury this, I will file a police report for larceny and name the HOA as an accessory for failing to act on documented evidence. Mr. Chen suddenly looked defeated, the power draining out of his posture. No, that won't be necessary. I will issue a formal infraction notice immediately and schedule an emergency review by the HOA board. V. The counterattack. The infraction notice was hand-delivered to Carol Denvers's door at 11:12 a.m. Elias tracked the progress not by the time, but by the subtle seismic shift in the building's atmosphere. At 11:15 a.m., his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He already knew who it was. He waited for the call to drop to voicemail, but then, against his better judgment, he swiped to answer. Elias, it's Carol. Her voice was tightly controlled, the sweet veneer barely concealing the steel underneath. Ms. Denvers, Elias replied coolly. You received the notice. The notice? Elias, what in God's name is this garbage? Theft? Are you serious? I thought you were a rational man. I told you my unit was having a slight issue. I merely borrowed your charging plug for a few minutes while waiting for the tow truck, which never arrived, by the way. Unreliable service. The log shows 7.1 kilowatt hours were drawn, Carol. That's not a few minutes. That's nearly an hour of charging a high-capacity battery. And your car was photographed, plugged into my dedicated line at 3:12 a.m., 3 weeks after I gave you a written warning about trespass. Her voice lost its brittle charm and turned ice cold. A photograph taken by a camera you illegally installed in a common area. Did you get approval from the HOA to install a clandestine camera in the garage, Elias? Because if you didn't, that is the violation. Illegal surveillance, harassment, privacy invasion. I was going to call you and offer you $100 for your trouble, but now I'm going to the HOA with a counter-complaint. Elias felt a moment of cold shock. She was trying to flip the script, turning his meticulous self-defense into an act of aggression. It was a classic Karen move, attack the messenger. Discredit the evidence. The camera is enclosed entirely within the housing of my private. Utility-owned equipment, Carol. The charger is on my dedicated power line. It is not a common area surveillance device. It is property protection. We'll let the lawyers decide that, Elias. You've crossed a line. And frankly, this obsession you have with my vehicle is disturbing. I feel unsafe in my own parking spot. Do you really want to escalate this into a legal dispute that costs us both thousands over a few cents of electricity? I don't need to pay a lawyer, Carol. The evidence speaks for itself. The HOA needs only to see the photo and the bill. If you want to discuss this, do it at the emergency board meeting Mr. Chen just scheduled for Tuesday evening. Elias ended the call without another word, his finger hovering over the block button. Tuesday night blitz. The emergency board meeting was held in the condo's airy top-floor library. Elias sat alone at one end of the long mahogany table facing the 4 HOA board members. The president, Dr. Allister, a retired cardiologist, Mrs. Schmidt, the treasurer, sharp-eyed and frugal, Mr. Patel, and, of course, the now white-hot center of the storm, Carol Denvers. Carol arrived late, making a dramatic entrance. She wore an immaculate white suit, suggesting purity and victimhood, and carried a thick, legal-looking binder. Dr. Allister, the president, cleared his throat. All right. We have an urgent matter concerning Unit 412 and 409. Mr. Chen has submitted documentation from Mr. Vance detailing unauthorized use of his private EV charging station. Carol, since you are a board member, you are invited to present your rebuttal before we vote on the disciplinary action. Carol smiled sadly. Thank you, Allister. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify this outrageous misunderstanding. Elias, I know you're a brilliant engineer, but sometimes logic gets the better of judgment. This entire situation is based on a fundamental flaw. Elias has become fixated on me, and he has committed an act of gross privacy violation. She opened her binder dramatically, sliding across a legal printout. My primary concern is that Mr. Vance has installed a covert high-resolution camera in the shared garage without any permit or notification, violating our community's privacy bylaws. Furthermore, the note he left was harassing and threatening. I submit that this entire complaint is retaliatory. She then turned to Elias, her eyes flashing with a predatory intensity. Elias, you admitted on the phone the camera was covert. You've been watching me. You are the aggressor here, not the victim of some imaginary theft. Dr. Alastair looked concerned. Mr. Vance, is this true? Did you install an unapproved camera? Elias remained perfectly calm, leaning forward. Dr. Alastair, my charging equipment is a private, dedicated utility connection paid for and maintained by me. The charger housing is my equipment. I installed a small camera inside the charger casing, angled only at the charging port, set to record only when an unauthorized vehicle illegally begins drawing power from my private line. I was not recording the common area. I was documenting a felony. He slid his own folder forward, directing their attention to Exhibit C. This photograph was taken less than 24 hours ago at 3:12 a.m. Carol's car, Carol's Tesla, plugged into my dedicated line, consuming 7.1 kilowatts of electricity that I will be billed for. This proves the surveillance was not harassment, but a necessary last resort defense against repeated, documented theft. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Furthermore, I would ask the board to review the Wallbox login data in Exhibit B. Carol unplugged my vehicle, waited for the charge to cease, and then plugged in her own, ensuring I would not be alerted until the session was complete, and then replugged my vehicle back in. This is not an accident. This is a highly manipulative process design. Elias stood motionless, the sweet, cloying stench of waste engine oil stinging his nostrils. It coated his private EV charging unit, dripping from the wall box housing onto the concrete, and a good portion of the sludge had found its way into the hybrid combustion engine bay of his Ioniq 5. The final, crude message from Carol, "I just borrowed a little oil from your engine," was pinned to the damaged charge point. The vindication he had felt barely an hour ago vaporized, replaced by a cold, stomach-dropping realization of vulnerability. This was not a parking dispute. This was targeted, malicious criminal damage designed to inflict maximum financial pain and psychological terror. The cost of a new wall box unit and cable was perhaps $2,000. The cost of cleaning and inspecting an engine contaminated by waste oil, potentially destroying seals, filters, and pumps, was catastrophic. Elias bypassed the police entirely in his initial rage. He first called his insurance company, then a specialized vehicle forensic cleaner. The cleaner was on site within an hour, a grizzled man named Frank who shook his head grimly as he surveyed the mess. Waste oil. Smells like diesel runoff, maybe mixed with something else acidic, Frank assessed, peering into the car's open hood with a flashlight. She went for the oil filler cap and maybe the cooling overflow. If any of this got into the oil pan and you started the engine, you'd seize it instantly. Total write-off. Did you try to drive it? No, I just found it. Smart. This is pure malice, son. You need to file a report. This is criminal mischief, minimum, pushing toward destruction of property. While Frank began the painstaking cleanup of the car and the hazmat disposal of the contaminated charging unit, Elias called the local precinct. An officer arrived, took a report, photographed the oily mess and the frantic, bolted-down note. The officer, a young man who looked bored and overheated, sighed after reviewing the initial theft complaint and the HOA ruling. So you reported your neighbor for stealing electricity, and she retaliated by vandalizing your property. Standard neighbor feud. We'll log the report, Mr. Vance. But unless you have video of her doing this or a witness, it's going to be filed under ongoing dispute. No immediate arrests. No warrant. But the note is clearly from her. She signed it. It was bolted to my property, Elias protested, pointing to the oil-soaked charger where the note had been removed by the crime scene tech. We can't prove she physically bolted it, sir. She's already claimed you're harassing her with surveillance. This looks like she's trying to flip the narrative and make you look unhinged. Get the insurance claim filed. If the HOA manager provides a statement, maybe we can elevate the charge." The officer was already walking away. The criminal justice system, like the HOA, preferred simplicity and clean, uncomplicated cases. Carol Denvers provided neither digs. The Foldelius walked back into the property management office, his suit jacket off, his mood predatory. He found Mr. Chen looking more gray than ever, surrounded by half-eaten donuts and crumpled coffee cups. "Mr. Chen, you saw the aftermath. The engine of my car was nearly totaled. This is felony criminal damage. You need to provide a statement to the police about the HOA ruling and her motivation for retaliation." Mr. Chen wrung his hands. "Elias, please. We are facing a nightmare here." Carol called Dr. Allister at 6 a.m., threatening a massive civil lawsuit against the HOA for illegal surveillance, defamation, and emotional distress. She claimed your covert camera caused her irreparable emotional harm, and that the public email was an act of targeted bullying. "She's lying, Mr. Chen. She's a thief and a vandal." "We know that. But she has a lawyer on retainer, and she's threatening to expose the HOA's history of financial mismanagement, which, between you and me, is messy." Dr. Allister is paralyzed with fear. "He's already ordered me to send a follow-up email retracting the first one, claiming the original ruling was issued prematurely pending further review." Elias stared, the air thick with disbelief. "Retracting it? You're going to let her erase the proof that the board fined her for theft?" "Elias, we have to protect the building's finances." Dr. Allister said, "If you drop the police report, the HOA will pay for the replacement wall box unit, maybe even cover your deductible on the car damage. But you have to stop. She's won this round." "She hasn't won anything," Elias growled, his voice tight. "You think a replacement charger will solve this?" "She nearly destroyed my property, and she will do it again until I leave." "You're rewarding her criminal behavior." Elias left the office, refusing the bribe. The lesson was stark. In this new personal war, he was completely alone. The law was too slow, and the HOA was too spineless. He had to be the final layer of security, X, the ghost sensor architecture. The problem was visibility. Carol knew where Elias's cameras were, or at least where they would be. The next trap needed to be invisible, layered, and multimodal. It had to be a ghost sensor activated by an invisible trigger, capturing the evidence not through vision alone, but through sound. Elias spent the next 4 days working from home, ordering equipment that looked innocuous, but packed military-grade surveillance capability. Layer 1. The acoustic fingerprint. He purchased a miniature parabolic microphone array, designed for highly directional sound recording over distance. He disguised it inside a faux ventilation grill, installing it not in his parking spot, but 20 feet away, near the entrance ramp, angled perfectly toward 412A. This microphone could isolate and capture a whisper, or the distinct, nearly silent electric whine of a Tesla coasting to a stop, over the low-frequency hum of the garage. Layer 2. The decoy and the delay. He replaced the ruined wall box with a new, cheaper unit. Beside it, he bolted a cheap, obvious dome-shaped security camera housing with a flashing red LED, a classic decoy. His logging system would monitor this new charger. Crucially, the system was programmed with a new logic: delay the kill switch. If unauthorized charging started, the system would wait 5 minutes before initiating the shutdown sequence, giving Carol just enough time to feel secure and drop her guard. Layer 3. The sub-frequency trigger. The most critical component was the trigger. Elias bought a vibration sensor originally used for bridge stress testing. He adapted it and discreetly sealed it beneath the first layer of epoxy paint in his parking spot, 412A, precisely where Carol would have to stand to plug in his charger. If she stepped on that 2-square-foot patch, the sensor would send a specific, unencrypted Wi-Fi signal. The logic. The system was armed nightly. When the sub-frequency trigger detected a human presence in the key zone and the acoustic fingerprint detected sound above 20 dB, a door opening, a muffled conversation, the parabolic microphone would activate and record for 15 seconds. If the recording captured her unique vocal pattern, A high-speed video clip from the decoy camera, which was secretly angled only at the feet and lower legs, would be saved to a cloud server. Elias tested it rigorously. He could step on the spot, drop a key, and his voice would be captured with crystalline clarity while the video showed only his trousers and shoes. The entire system was air-gapped from the condo's main network. When the Trap Snaps shut a week passed. Elias drove the rental Ioniq 5, keeping his distance. Carol's Tesla remained parked in 409B untouched. She was waiting, watching for him to make a move, enjoying the HOA's forced retraction. The public email had been sent. Elias was back to square one, but armed with paranoia. On Friday night at 2:47 a.m., the laptop on Elias's desk came alive. It didn't beep or buzz. A discrete red icon flashed on the corner of the screen. Trigger activated. Source 1, vibration. Active. Presence detected in 412A key zone. Source 2, acoustic. Active. Sound registered at 35 dB. Recording started. Elias held his breath, his eyes fixed on the streaming transcription of the acoustic recording. The audio was filtered, isolating two distinct, muffled voices. The first voice was unmistakable, Carol. She sounded confident, almost giddy. Carol, muffled, triumphant. See? He put up another one. It's pathetic. The HOA folded like cheap laundry. He thinks this little red light is going to stop me. A new voice, deep, male, and unfamiliar, answered. Man, low, husky. You're sure he won't call the police again? That was messy, Carol. I still have the container in my trunk. Carol. Relax. The police won't touch a neighbor dispute. And that engine oil stunt? Brilliant. He's scared, Daniel. He's driving a rental. Now just get the plug, hold it for 3 seconds. I want the system to log the failed handshake. Then we move to phase 2. Daniel. And phase 2 is tonight? Carol. Yes. The security codes for the utility panel. We're not just going to borrow electricity anymore. We're going to kill his power entirely and blame it on the faulty installation he put in. The HOA will have no choice but to have his whole line removed. I get my parking spot back, and he's out of the building by Christmas. The audio ended with the clear metallic clack of the charging plug being pulled out, followed by silence. The ghost sensor had captured the acoustic evidence, a clear confession of vandalism, intent to damage, and a shocking new plan. Sabotage of the building's utility infrastructure to force Elias out. Elias stared at the transcription. Daniel, utility panel codes. This was no longer about a few stolen kilowatt hours. This was an organized, multi-step conspiracy to destroy his property and force his eviction, and Carol had an accomplice. His trap had caught more than just a thief. It had caught the word Daniel and the phrase security codes for the utility panel hammered against Elias's consciousness like a physical blow. The ghost sensor had provided a gift, a recording of intent to commit a felony that endangered the entire building's infrastructure, not just Elias's property. Sabotaging the main power line was a reckless, high-level act of malice. This wasn't about $500 anymore. This was about forced eviction and property destruction that could total hundreds of thousands. It was 2:55 a.m. Phase 2 is tonight, Daniel had confirmed. Elias had less than an hour, maybe less than 30 minutes, before they made their move. The police wouldn't respond fast enough to a potential infrastructure threat based on an unverified audio file from a man already flagged for neighbor dispute. The HOA was useless. Elias had to be the law, the security, and the arresting officer. He threw on a dark utility jacket and grabbed his emergency go bag, a small backpack containing specialized electronics, network tools, and a powerful military-grade handheld flashlight. His immediate goal was the main utility room in the basement, 2 floors below the parking garage. This room housed the main circuit breakers, the sub-metering unit for the EV chargers, and the network switch for the building's infrastructure. Carol and Daniel planned to gain access and, based on Carol's desire to blame Elias's faulty installation, they would likely target the main feeder line to his specific area, causing a catastrophic localized outage. Elias raced downstairs, taking the service elevator to the basement. The basement was cold, smelling of stale concrete and ozone. The utility room door was a heavy, unmarked steel slab secured by a standard magnetic lock and a keypad. The keypad Daniel had the codes for. See, the fail-safe system Elias didn't attempt to breach the lock. He didn't need to. He needed to document the attempt. He went to work on the utility room's immediate surroundings. First, he used a custom-built directional Wi-Fi jammer, surgically tuned to a narrow frequency band, to knock out the signal of the lock's external wireless sensor, just enough to delay the code input long enough for his trap to deploy. Second, he installed a tiny, wide-angle lens camera, the sibling of the eye, inside the plastic housing of a nearby fire extinguisher, aiming it squarely at the utility room keypad. This camera was hardwired into his backpack logger, not the building's network, providing an isolated, time-stamped visual of anyone attempting the code. Third, the psychological trap. Elias pulled out a sleek, rectangular aluminum plate about the size of a passport and affixed it magnetically next to the keypad. It looked like an official utility inspection plate. However, embedded within it was a high-capacity speaker and a small microcontroller. This device was connected wirelessly to the audio file of Carol and Daniel's conspiracy confession. The final logic. When the magnetic lock detected the first key press on the keypad, an indicator that Daniel had started phase 2, the aluminum plate would instantly flash a brilliant blue-white strobe light, disorienting the perpetrator and, more importantly, illuminating the scene for the new camera, and then play the most damning part of the audio confession at maximum volume. Elias finished the installation with minutes to spare. He retreated to a small, dark boiler room hallway 50 feet away, out of the line of sight, but within clear hearing range. He activated his laptop, which was now receiving the live feed from the new camera. The betrayal of Daniel. A few agonizing minutes crawled by. Then, two figures rounded the corner from the garage ramp. Daniel, a bulky man in a nondescript work jacket, and Carol, wearing her cashmere but looking tightly wound and nervous. "Hurry up!" "Daniel," Carol whispered, her voice carrying faintly in the vast concrete silence. "I don't want to be down here when the night shift security guard comes around." "Relax, I told you I know the sequence. I used to manage the sub-metering for this floor before they switched contractors. I still have the old master code." Daniel approached the steel door with confidence, pulling a pair of disposable gloves onto his hands. He looked around once, dismissively, before focusing on the keypad. His hand went up. Click! The first key press registered. Flash! The aluminum plate exploded with a blinding, disorienting blue-white strobe light, searing the image of Daniel's face, eyes wide with shock, into the camera's sensor. Then came the sound, echoing deafeningly in the basement, bouncing off the concrete walls. Carol, amplified, triumphant. "See?" He put up another one. "It's pathetic." The HOA folded like cheap laundry. "He thinks this little red light is going to stop me." Daniel, amplified, low, husky. "You're sure he won't call the police again?" "That was messy, Carol. I still have the container in my trunk." Carol, amplified, giddy. "Relax. The police won't touch a neighbor dispute. And that engine oil stunt? Brilliant. He's scared, Daniel. He's driving a rental. Now just get the plug, hold it for 3 seconds. Then we move to phase 2, the security codes for the utility panel. We're not just going to borrow electricity anymore. We're going to kill his power entirely and blame it on the faulty installation he put in." Daniel froze, his body rigid, his jaw slack. He looked not at the speaker, but at Carol, his face a mask of sudden, violent betrayal. Carol's expression shifted from fear to pure, venomous panic. "Elias!" she shrieked, looking around wildly for the source of the recording. "Carol, what the hell is that?" Daniel stammered, pulling off his gloves. "You said he was just recording in his parking spot." "You recorded me? You recorded us?" "I didn't record anything, you idiot. It's him! It's Elias! He set a trap!" Carol screamed, pointing futilely toward the dark hallway where Elias was hidden. Before Carol could flee, 2 things happened simultaneously. First, Elias stepped out, his powerful flashlight cutting through the gloom. illuminating Daniel and Carol like actors on a stage. The police are already on the way. "Carol," Elias said, his voice flat and resonating with absolute authority. "You've just been caught on audio and video attempting to commit criminal utility sabotage. And Daniel, I think you have some explaining to do about which contractor gave you those codes and why you still have the container from the oil attack in your trunk." Second, the main security door from the lobby into the basement burst open, and a middle-aged man in a cheap security uniform, eyes wide with confusion and dread, charged in, followed by two uniformed police officers who had been alerted by the security guard responding to the sound of the deafening confession. The police saw it all. The illuminated utility panel. Daniel standing with his hands up in surrender next to the screaming, panicked Carol, and the small, sleek aluminum plate still emitting a weak blue glow. 5. The cost of the code. The confrontation ended swiftly. Daniel, faced with undeniable audio-visual proof of his involvement in both the current attempted felony and the previous vandalism, the oil confession, immediately folded. Elias later learned the full truth. Daniel was Carol's nephew, recently fired from a subcontracting job with the building's utility management firm. Carol had paid him $5,000 for the original waste oil vandalism and promised him an additional $10,000 to execute Phase 2 using the codes he'd illicitly kept. As the police led Daniel away in handcuffs, Carol began screaming, not at Elias but at the officers, demanding to know if they had a warrant to arrest her nephew. She threatened lawsuits against the police, the condo, and Elias, her white suit doing nothing to conceal the pure, raw madness in her eyes. "You're a sick, paranoid little man, Elias. You'll regret this. I'm going to make sure you never sleep again," she spat, her voice cracking with fury and humiliation. One of the arresting officers turned to Elias. "Mr. Vance, we have the audio, the confession of conspiracy, and the video of the attempted breach. We're taking Daniel in for questioning on the attempted utility sabotage and the earlier vandalism. Ms. Denvers is currently threatening an officer, so she's coming in too for disorderly conduct and suspicion of conspiracy." "Thank you for the quick thinking." Elias watched them go. His heart rate finally started to drop. He had won the war, not just the battle. He had exposed the conspiracy, saved the building infrastructure, and ensured that Carol and her accomplice were physically removed from the premises by law enforcement. He walked back to his Ioniq 5 rental, the keys feeling heavy in his hand. He wasn't thinking about the money or the fine. He was thinking about Carol's hysterical face as she realized her entire house of entitlement and lies had collapsed around her. He had shut down the kindness, and the trap had worked perfectly. But as Elias drove past the main lobby and caught sight of the building's main electronic notice board, the one that usually displayed news about pool, maintenance, or garbage collection, he saw a new, flashing message in urgent red text. It had been posted minutes ago, likely by Dr. Alistair. Scrambling to explain the sirens. Urgent resident notice. Due to an attempted malicious breach of the building's main utility infrastructure tonight, effective immediately, all private EV charger installations are temporarily disabled, pending a full security review and replacement of the main utility access codes. Elias pulled over, staring at the screen. The entire garage was now silent. Carol was gone. Daniel was arrested. But in the end, his meticulous battle against theft and entitlement had resulted in the immediate, collective loss of the one thing he had fought so hard to protect: access to his own dedicated private power.